are continuing to do. The vision of the DMC legislation was very, very good. It is creating proactively an environment of support for growing our city as a great destination medical center, scientifically and medically. You're doing that. We're doing that. And honestly, the biggest thing in my mind goes back to the people. When you sit across the table from somebody and you can say, I've got the support of people up and down, all throughout government, all throughout Mayo Clinic, they love to hear that because they know that'll translate into effective cures for patients. And that's what they're thinking about. They also want to be economically successful, but they want to drive discovery. Some of the infrastructure that they need are things to support discovery, like an incubator to help those early companies develop infrastructure or access infrastructure that they probably can't afford at their stage, but they very much need to advance their technology to the point where a larger company can take it over and scale it. They want a beautiful city with welcoming people and a diverse community. So all the things that you're doing are what we need. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess maybe one last thing I'll say about infrastructure that we often get asked about is the human infrastructure, the workforce, and just an acknowledgement of the incredible efforts around workforce development, training programs at RCTC or University of Minnesota Rochester and Winona State and a number of others are oftentimes it's really the first question they ask is how do we get to know Mayo, and the second question is that's asked is what's the workforce and talent pipeline. So just put that on the table as another important piece of the work that's going on in this community. So with that, and Dr. Ali, you're welcome to stay, or if so, you're going to be asked a lot of questions. So feel free.
I'm available right in the corner.
Feel free to stay or sit in the audience. So with that, we wanted to, as the chair said, each meeting you've asked for us to reflect on the metrics that are driving the work. And Jamie, if you'll join me. Am I advancing slides? Cool. Okay. So you've asked that we have a metric that we discuss with you, and that you've asked us to be more granular about understanding the metrics. And as you know, that there are a set of goals that were established as a part of the DMC development framework, and you've heard us occasionally present on progress towards the use of public investment to stimulate private development. You've heard us talk about jobs, talked about the types of jobs that are being created, the new tax revenue. What we've really not spent a lot of time talking about is a metric around experience. And ultimately, that's what we're after, is building a city that is the kind of experience that people who live here and people who visit here and people who may move here want to feel. As a part of that, this board said, and the DMC development plan talked about the importance of public space as a contributor to the kind of experience in Rochester. And we learned early on in the development plan process that people were dissatisfied with the type of public space in the downtown. It was really a dissatisfier. And really decided to use public space as a tool to sort of create an address, if you will, for our downtown and create value that would spur development, and ultimately create a downtown that was attractive both for people who live here and people who visit here. And this board went so far as to say there ought to be a signature public space as a part of all of the sub-districts. And that would be connected, would serve that sub-district itself, but ultimately would be connected. And the first public space that you directed us to work on is the area of the heart of the city, and the Peace Plaza area. And what we're going to do today is simply present to you how we are going to go about measuring the effectiveness of the intervention, if you will, of Peace Plaza and the improvements being made to Peace Plaza. And so with that, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Jamie Rothy, who has been leading this effort on your behalf, and invite her to describe how we're going to go about evaluating that work.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning.
So we wanted to start off by bringing us back to the beginning of Heart of the City when we did a significant amount of community engagement in 2016. Through that engagement, actually the engagement included a variety of different activities. You may remember we had street teams, we held open meetings, we met with businesses, we met with store owners, landowners, employees downtown, people that weren't using downtown as well, to gather information about the vision for Heart of the City. And these principles came out of that work that you see before you today. And we use this as a framework to begin the discussion about what does the future of the Heart of the City look like. That work then led us to identifying a set of goals. And these goals of what we've used for every decision that has been made in design, as we prototyped and test different concepts out, we've gone back to these goals, which the community has said to us, which are really important. You see them before you: safety, accessibility, creating more public space, flexibility, sustainability, arts integration, and infrastructure were all incredibly important. And at times it's challenging to keep those all in front of you, but it was part of our the work that we had and did, and what we want to now measure upon. So why do we do post-occupancy analysis? We need to know if we have improved the space. Many of us have been into Heart of the City or Peace Plaza prior and have memories of visiting that space, but we wanted to know, based upon those goals and those principles, have we improved those? And these are the things that we're asking ourselves in this process, is we want to know what works well and what didn't work well. You go in with the best of intention, but sometimes on the back end, it isn't working that way, and we want to understand what those pieces are. We also want to understand if we met original expectations. We need to understand what improvements we need to make. And we want to inform future public space projects as well. So as we're in Discovery Walk and moving forward with that project, as we take on the waterfront area and other public spaces, all of this information will be very important as we go forward. So next steps for our team, what we're in the process of doing right now for the next 60 days is building and studying the design of what methodologies we'll be using and how we begin to build the post-occupancy analysis. And then we'll begin to implement that work. So we'll start to study using observation and mapping and surveying. We'll do interviews with people. We'll go back to people that we interviewed from before. We'll interview new people. We'll participate in community events. We've had a lot of events already in the space, and we'll continue to participate in those to gather information. We also are really intentional about the time that we're doing this. We want to see how people are using it during all seasons. So how is it working in the winter, and how is it working in the summer? You may recall back to those principles that all seasons were incredibly important to be a destination space. And then we'll build a report and come back to you and share what we found.
Could I stop on this for a second, just to make a point of why I think this is important to look at this. When you see that interviews up there, we're talking about metrics right now. And there's a big discussion in metrics right now. As somebody who's grown out of this with cities and others of looking at data and numbers, there's a recognition that when you deal with something like experience, there's not a data point. There's often that old-fashioned thing of talk to people. So this issue of using interviews, and us, I think, being disciplined to say that there may not be an indicator where we can see it move from 27% to 32%. There is the importance to take anecdotal interviews and use them as part of the metric. So I just want to underscore that I support this idea in a metrics, even as rigid as I've historically been about metrics. That's really important right now. Do people like this space? And have in-depth interviews. That is a legitimate way to measure.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. And that's what I have to present today, Patrick. Thank you.
Just sort of ending on that and fielding any other questions you might have. So design began in 2016. So just as a reminder, that's the nature of public projects. The construction will be largely completed at the end of November, but a project really isn't done until you've done the post-occupancy analysis, which is rarely done. Oftentimes people move on to the next thing, but we are going to be very intentional about measuring, did it perform as we had established at the beginning against these specific metrics.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple quick comments from a council perspective. I appreciate this, and as somebody who does qualitative evaluation, really value this approach. And appreciate that it's a longer time frame than you think some of this work will take because of being really thoughtful about the study design. I hope that we really do think about what this feedback and comments mean for our future work, because there's such an opportunity to learn, and we are using such an incredible amount of resources to get this right. So how can we keep improving with each of our future projects? With that in mind, the timeline feels a little bit concerning to me because of the Discovery Walk timing, as well as we are bidding out construction and beginning the process. I'm wondering how you see the feedback interacting with the Discovery Walk space in particular, as that's obviously a very public realm focused space.
Thank you for your question. I think the relationship that we've built between Heart of the City and Discovery Walk, we've already established kind of a space where we are constantly sharing information, even from the beginning stages of Heart of the City, to inform the Discovery Walk project and others. And I would see ourselves, while this timeline shows like a beginning and an end, I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to share just-in-time information. So as soon as we're learning, sharing that back with the Discovery Walk team and making sure that we're not waiting to the end to report out.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Can you share findings along the way, acknowledging that we're continuing to learn? But I think there are going to be some important learnings fairly early on in the discussion.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Member Williams.
This is actually kind of a larger question or just comment. I was talking with the mayor earlier about just the changes in downtowns. Obviously with COVID, the pandemic, changes in use of public spaces. As we kind of track metrics on what that's looking like, and the qualitative piece helps us, I think, get at some of the context, right? Because I mean, the use of public spaces, and again, I got down here early today and just drove around downtown. It's looking fantastic, actually. I think wonderful progress, but I'm just curious how we're going to track or factor in the context of fewer workers downtown for a while at least, and just changes in kind of the use of public spaces.
I think it's a great question. We have seen a lot of change even over the last year and a half of how that space is being used. And we've worked together with the Rochester Downtown Alliance and other organizations to be actively addressing what is the need downtown. So even in the beginning of the project, when we kicked off the construction and COVID happened and our state began to shut down and respond to COVID, we had to make quick changes to adapt to that and to leverage the opportunity. And I find ourselves in that same situation now, is that we based upon our research on, I think, a set of research that was really important to help to inform the design, and then we can build from that and grow and adjust through this post-occupancy analysis. But we continue to adjust and change. For a recent example is, as we looked on the plaza, we recognized that more people were looking for more spaces to sit outside. Mm-hmm. So we partnered with the Rochester Downtown Alliance to bring in more flexible seating into spaces. That was the same thing that we heard from our colleagues at Mayo Clinic, is that patients were looking to eat outside in the fresh air. They needed more space to do that. And so our groups came together to provide that. And so that's just a quick example of how we're doing it real time. And imagine that we'll take this information and continue to adjust as we go forward.
Mr. Chair, I just think it's going to be really interesting to kind of see, because you're right, there's actually potential upside to some of the outdoor spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll just be really curious to kind of see what we learn from it.
I want to call attention to, we have a great resource on the EDA, Tom Fisher, who leads the design center at the U, and he's got a new book coming out on post-COVID cities. And I was talking to him about this just the other day, and he was saying, really, for the first time, downtowns and commercial districts are competing with the experience at home. So the key word there is experience, is that what it requires is cities to do dramatically more for experiences that you can't get other places. The idea of common ground, the idea of public space is going to be dramatically more important, at least in his view, and I certainly think it makes sense. So it does reinforce the idea that a person can have an interaction via Zoom with somebody who they work with, but they can't connect with that person or with other new people in the common ground, the Discovery Walks, the Heart of the Cities. Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think those of us in the community and that are talking about this understand it, but I'm not sure the broader community does. For so many Mayo patients, this is home. that space that we're building is their home. And I think we've been really cognizant of that as we've developed it, that this has to be a space where they feel warm and welcomed as well as the broader community. So we have a dual purpose. And I guess I want to just add, listening and looking to some of the comments that I've been seeing out there as we've been doing our step-by-step unveiling of the art and the Peace Fountain placement and the opening of the street. Those are steps, but it's not complete yet. And some people are jumping to judgment about it's done. I just want to be really clear. That heart of the city is not yet complete. We are entering a time as we reach that completion date where we can't really make it look like it's going to look a year from now, because it means warm weather with water and benches and activation. That's going to have to wait until the spring. So as we're doing this measurement, it's one of the reasons why I'm glad you're waiting a little longer to come to that full conclusion, because we need to get through the build. We need to get through the winter, which are so different in our community, and let it finish and be activated to find out if it's what people want. We can't make that judgment yet. So I do appreciate the timeline, and I also appreciate, as the council president requested, that you be iterative in sharing the information and making changes on Discovery Square from what you've learned. So that's it.
Mr. Campbell has his.
Yeah, Mr. Campbell, Member Campbell.
Yes, now that we're sort of coming to the completion of the heart of the city, I really hope that we can shift some emphasis to the Chateau Theater. Speaking on behalf of all those that come to Rochester and stay in hotels, you need something to do in the evening other than stay in your hotel room and watch TV.
Yep.
And the Chateau Theater, in my mind, should always have been a focal point of activity. Mike Doherty and I are both on a board of an organization here in Naples, Florida, that consists of music and art museum, and it's a center point of activity in the community. And I just think the Chateau is something that can be a major part of as the mayor said, of all the visitors that come to the community. I think the Chateau can be really a shining light of activity in the heart of the city. I hope the emphasis will really shift now to how we utilize that facility.
Good. I also want to note, Member Wheelock has joined us. Say, just before we move off this topic, could you back up 2 slides, that one with the multiple images on it of right there. Thank you very much. I just want us, before we leave this, to just get focused on this slide. Those of you who are watching this and maybe can't see it, it has each of these areas. This was not us in a vacuum thinking, what the heck should we do in Rochester? This was the result of deep community engagement, many community meetings where we asked people in Rochester, what do you want as part of the experience here? And it was a really important point, because it was really where we pivoted from Destination Medical Center being about things that are infrastructure to the idea that the experience of it being inviting and connected and green and winter ready and about adding life and being bright and healing and all of those abstract parts of things. These were all points that the community said to us, here's how we want our public space. And so I just want, our North Star is one that you community set for us, and it was about experience is up there with paving and pavers. Okay, well, thank you very much. This was really helpful. Patrick, do you want to go over it?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Go back to the consent agenda.
Yeah,